Picture a teenage captive, returned in 1838, her face a map of scars and her nose charred to the bone, after 18 months with the Comanche. In 1836, 300 warriors stormed the Parker settlement, leaving 5 dead and scalps taken in hours. That same year, they ruled 250,000 square miles of the American West, a tribe so fierce settlers trembled at their name. The Comanche killed over 30 in the Great Raid of 1840, avenging 35 of their own lost in a broken peace talk. Their brutality was unmatched, but what drove them to burn faces and claim 250,000 miles as their own? Stay to the end to uncover the truth. The rise of a nomadic people, the Comanche beginnings. Let's travel back in time to the early days of the Comanche. They started as a small group living in the Great Basin, a rugged area in what's now Wyoming and Utah, far from the wide-open plains they would one day rule. Around the 1600s, they began moving south, reaching the lands we know today as Texas, Oklahoma, and New Mexico by the early 1700s. This was a vast region stretching over 400,000 square miles at its peak, with endless grasslands and rolling hills. Before Europeans showed up, the Comanche lived a simple life. They roamed as nomads, hunting deer and small game with bows and arrows, gathering berries and roots from the land. Their numbers were modest, maybe a few thousand at most, but they knew how to survive in a harsh world. Then everything changed. In the late 1600s, they met the horse, brought to the Americas by Spanish explorers. This wasn't just a new tool for them, it was a revolution. While other tribes used horses for basic tasks, the Comanche saw something bigger. By 1700, they had learned to breed horses, turning wild Spanish Mustangs into strong, fast animals perfect for the plains. They became expert riders, able to shoot arrows from horseback with deadly accuracy. Historians estimate they had thousands of horses by the mid-1700s, more than any other tribe in the region. This gave them speed and power no one could match. Their whole way of life shifted because of this. They could now hunt buffalo, a massive animal that roamed the plains in herds of millions, providing meat, hides, and bones for tools. A single buffalo hunt could feed a family for weeks. They could travel 50 miles in a day, chasing game or escaping enemies. This mobility let them grow stronger, with some estimates putting their population at 20,000 by the 1800s. The horse didn't just change how they lived, it made them a force to be reckoned with. From a small band of wanderers, the Comanche turned into a people who would shape the history of the American West, all because they took what the land and the newcomers offered and made it their own. Masters of the plains, how the Comanche built an empire. Picture a tribe that took something foreign and turned it into the key to their power. The Spanish arrived in the Americas in the 1500s, bringing horses with them. Many tribes saw the horse as useful, but the Comanche saw it as everything. They didn't just ride horses, they mastered them. By the early 1700s, they had thousands of horses, bred from the wild Mustangs that roamed the plains. Some say they owned up to 15,000 horses by the mid-1800s, more than any other group in the region. With these animals, they could do things others couldn't. They hunted buffalo faster, bringing down herds that numbered in the millions across the Great Plains. One hunt could yield enough meat to feed dozens of families for months. They could travel 50 or 60 miles in a single day, moving camps or chasing enemies with ease. And when they fought, they struck hard and fast, often gone before anyone could fight back. This power gave them control over a huge area. By the 1750s, historians estimate the Comanche held 250,000 square miles of land. That's bigger than modern-day France or Spain. Their territory stretched from Texas up to Kansas, over to Colorado, and down into northern Mexico. They didn't just live there, they ruled it. They pushed the Apache, a fierce tribe in their own right, out of the southern plains. By the 1800s, the Apache were nearly wiped out in those areas, with some estimates saying the Comanche killed or displaced thousands of them. The Spanish tried to move north past the Rio Grande, but for over 100 years, from the 1700s to the mid-1800s, the Comanche stopped them cold. Spanish records show they lost hundreds of soldiers and settlers in fights with these warriors. But it wasn't just about fighting. The Comanche were smart. They built a trade network that reached far and wide. They traded horses and buffalo hides with other tribes, like the Kiowa and Cheyenne, who became their allies. They even dealt with French and American traders, swapping goods for guns and metal tools. In 1 year alone, around 1830, they might have traded hundreds of horses, each one worth a small fortune to settlers. They took captives too, sometimes adopting them into the tribe or trading them back for supplies. This wasn't luck or chance, it was a plan. They used the horse to create a way of life that made them strong and feared. People often think of native tribes as helpless against European settlers. The Comanche proved that wrong. They didn't wait for others to decide their fate. They took control. With every horse they bred, every mile they rode, they showed they could adapt and thrive. Their enemies called them brutal, but to the Comanche, this was survival. They built an empire on the plains, not with cities or castles, but with speed, strength, and a deep understanding of their world. Clash of Worlds, the Comanche fight for survival. The Comanche had power, but it didn't come free. By the 1800s, their plains started filling up with new faces. Spanish settlers came first, then Mexicans, and finally Americans. These weren't just traders passing through. They wanted the land itself. They built homes, ranches, and towns on the same grasslands where the Comanche hunted and lived. By 1830, thousands of settlers had moved into Texas alone, with numbers growing fast. The Comanche, who once numbered around 20,000 in the early 1800s, now faced a flood of people who saw the plains as theirs to take. This wasn't a small problem. It was a threat to everything they knew. Violence grew as the century went on. In 1840, one event showed how bad it got. The Comanche launched the Great Raid of Texas. They hit hard, killing over 30 settlers and burning homes all the way to the Gulf Coast, nearly 200 miles from their usual lands. They took hundreds of horses, some say as many as 500, in just a few days. This wasn't random. It came after the Council House fight in San Antonio. Earlier that year, 65 Comanche, including women and children, went to talk peace with Texas leaders. Things went wrong fast. The Texans tried to hold 12 chiefs hostage, and in the chaos, 35 Comanche were killed. The survivors didn't forget. The Great Raid was their answer, a strike that left settlers in shock. Another clash happened in 1836 at the Parker Settlement. Over 300 warriors attacked, killing 5 men and taking 5 captives, including 9-year-old Cynthia Ann Parker. She grew up Comanche and stayed with them for 24 years. These fights weren't rare. From 1820 to 1850, historians estimate the Comanche killed hundreds of settlers across Texas and Mexico, maybe close to 1,000 over those decades. They didn't stop there. They burned ranches and stole livestock, taking thousands of cattle and horses over the years. Settlers called them savages. They wrote stories of Comanche cruelty, painting them as monsters. But look at it from the other side. Smallpox hit the tribe hard in the late 1700s and again in the 1800s, cutting their numbers by thousands. Some say they dropped from 20,000 to under 10,000 by 1850. Then came the buffalo hunters. Settlers and soldiers killed millions of buffalo, the Comanche's main food source. By the 1870s, herds that once covered the plains in the millions were down to a few thousand. This wasn't just hunger, it was starvation creeping in. Their raids weren't wild outbursts. They were a fight to hold on, to push back against people taking their home and their way of life. Think about Europe back then. Napoleon's armies marched across countries from 1800 to 1815, burning villages and taking what they wanted. Over 3 million died in those wars, soldiers and civilians alike. The Comanche killed far fewer, but their goal was the same: protect what was theirs. Settlers scalped Comanche too, sometimes for money. Texas paid $200 per native scalp in the 1850s, and hundreds were turned in. Both sides played rough. The Comanche weren't alone in this. They were a people caught in a storm, striking out to survive when the world they knew started slipping away. Warriors of fear, the Comanche way of war. Now we come to what made the Comanches so feared, their way of fighting. They didn't just battle their enemies, they left people shaking. Their reputation for brutality spread across the plains, and it wasn't without reason. Captives didn't just die quick deaths. They faced horrors that stuck in the minds of even the hardest settlers. The Comanche used war to send a message, and they made sure it was loud. Take Matilda Lockhart's story. In 1838, she was 16 years old, living in Texas, when the Comanche took her. She was gone for 18 months. When she came back in 1840, people barely recognized her. Her nose was half burned off, down to the bone. Her body was covered in scars and sores from head to toe. Witnesses said she'd been beaten, burned, and worse by Comanche women and men. Another tale comes from that same year, 1840. A settler was caught and buried alive up to his neck. They left his head sticking out under the hot sun, letting him bake for hours until he was gone. These weren't one-time things. Stories like this popped up again and again. In the 1830s and 1840s, dozens of captives, maybe over 100, came back with marks of Comanche punishment, if they came back at all. Their methods were grim. They scalped people while they were still alive, peeling the skin off with sharp knives. Some reports say they'd cut off eyelids, leaving victims to stare into the sun until their eyes gave out. Others talk of tying men to stakes and setting fires around them, watching them burn slow. Women and kids weren't spared either. In the Great Raid of 1840, they killed over 30 settlers, and survivors said the Comanche took young captives, some as young as 6, and tortured them too. One account from 1844 says they pegged out a dozen prisoners near a campfire, skinning them bit by bit before finishing them off. Numbers are hard to pin down, but across the mid-1800s, hundreds of settlers likely met these fates. It's easy to call this savage. Settlers did. They wrote books and letters about the Comanche like they were devils. But hold on a minute. This wasn't chaos. It was purpose. The Comanche used torture to pay back losses. If a warrior died, they'd take it out on captives, making sure the enemy felt their pain. It was also a warning. Leave us alone, or this is what happens. For them, war wasn't just about winning. It was about keeping their way of life alive. They'd lost thousands to smallpox by the 1800s, maybe half their people over decades. Settlers killed their buffalo too, dropping herds from millions to thousands. Every raid was a strike back at a world closing in. Now look at the other side. Settlers weren't clean-handed. In Texas, from 1848 to 1859, the state paid $200 for every native scalp brought in. Rangers and soldiers turned in hundreds, maybe over 500 in that time. They didn't care if it was Comanche or another tribe, man or woman. They scalped kids too. In Mexico, bounty hunters took thousands of Apache and Comanche scalps. In the 1830s, paid per head. Armies burned native camps, leaving no survivors. In 1864, the Sand Creek Massacre saw U.S. troops kill over 150 Cheyenne and Arapaho, mostly women and children, and mutilate the bodies. Both sides played this game of blood. The Comanche's ways shock us today. They should. But they weren't alone in it. They fought with what they had, in a time when everyone was brutal. To them, this was survival, not sport. Their enemies pushed them hard, and they pushed back harder. It's a dark part of their story, but it's also a piece of who they were, a people refusing to go quiet. Turning points, moments that defined the Comanche struggle. The clash between the Comanche and settlers wasn't just a long, slow burn. A few big moments stand out, showing how deep this fight ran. Two events tell the story best. They show the Comanche's strength, their pain, and their will to keep going. These weren't just battles. They were turning points that shaped their history, and the plains they called home. First up is the Council House fight. This happened in 1840 in San Antonio. The Comanche wanted peace, or at least a break from the fighting. They sent 65 people to talk with Texas leaders, including 12 chiefs, plus women and kids. They brought captives to trade, hoping to settle things, but the Texans had other plans. They demanded the Comanche hand over all their prisoners, not just a few. When the chiefs said no, the Texans tried to take them hostage. It went bad fast. Soldiers opened fire, and in minutes, 35 Comanche were dead. That's over half the group, cut down in a meeting meant for peace. 7 Texans died too, but the damage was done. The surviving Comanche didn't run off to lick their wounds. They hit back hard. That hit came with the Great Raid of 1840. Just months after the council house fight, they gathered over 400 warriors, some say as many as 600. They rode out from their camps and struck deep into Texas. They didn't stop at the frontier. They pushed all the way to the Gulf Coast, hitting towns like Victoria and Linville, nearly 200 miles from their usual lands. In a few days, they killed over 30 settlers. They burned houses and stores to the ground. They took captives, too, dragging off dozens of men, women, and kids. And the horses? They grabbed hundreds. Estimates say they stole between 300 and 500 in that one raid. Texas couldn't stop them. The settlers were left stunned, picking up pieces while the Comanche rode off with their revenge. Then there's the Parker family attack in 1836. This one happened earlier, out on the Texas frontier. Over 300 Comanche warriors swept into a small settlement called Fort Parker. They caught the families off guard. In a couple of hours, they killed 5 men, scalping them on the spot. They didn't stop there. They took 5 captives, including 9-year-old Cynthia Ann Parker and her 6-year-old brother, John. The raid was quick and brutal, over before anyone could fight back. Cynthia's story didn't end there. She stayed with the Comanche for 24 years, marrying a chief and raising a family. She became one of them, choosing their life over her old one. Her son, Quanah Parker, grew up to lead the tribe in its last stand decades later. This attack wasn't just a grab for loot. It showed how the Comanche could strike anywhere, anytime. These moments weren't accidents. They came from a people pushed to the edge. The council house fight started with betrayal. The Texans broke trust, and 35 Comanche paid with their lives. The Great Raid was their answer, a way to say they wouldn't bow. The Parker Raid showed their reach, hitting a settlement 100 miles into settler territory. From 1836 to 1840, they launched dozens of raids like these, killing hundreds and taking thousands of horses and cattle. Settlers saw it as proof of Comanche cruelty. But for the Comanche, it was survival. Smallpox had already taken thousands of their people by then. Settlers were carving up their lands, killing their buffalo. Every strike was a push to hold on to what they had left. The numbers tell part of the story. In the 1830s alone, they might have hit over 50 settlements, big and small. They lost warriors too, maybe hundreds over those years, but they kept fighting. These events weren't just about blood. They were about a people refusing to fade. The Comanche didn't start this war. They answered it with all the strength they could muster. The end of an era, the Comanche's fall and lasting spirit. Even the strongest can't stand forever. By the 1870s, the Comanche's grip on the plains started slipping. They had ruled for over 150 years, but new forces came crashing in. The U.S. military didn't let up. They sent thousands of soldiers, armed with rifles and cannons, to hunt down Comanche bands. Disease hit hard too. Smallpox swept through their camps again and again, killing hundreds at a time. Then there were the buffalo, the heart of their world. Settlers and hunters wiped them out. By 1875, the last free Comanche group, about 400 people led by Quanah Parker, gave up. They walked into a reservation in Oklahoma, ending a way of life that had shaped the West. The numbers show how fast it fell apart. In the early 1800s, the Comanche had around 20,000 people. Smallpox cut that down hard. By 1849, one outbreak killed over 1,000 in a single year. By the 1870s, some guess they were down to 3,000 or 4,000. The buffalo went even faster. Back in 1830, millions roamed the plains, maybe 30 million across the West. Hunters started shooting them for hides and sport. The U.S. Army helped, wanting to starve the tribes out. Between 1870 and 1874, they killed over 4 million buffalo in the southern plains alone. By 1880, less than 1,000 were left. The Comanche couldn't hunt like they used to. Their horses starved too, dropping from thousands to a few hundred in those last years. This wasn't just bad luck, it was planned. The U.S. government wanted the plains cleared for settlers and railroads. In 1867, they tried treaties, like the Medicine Lodge Treaty, promising food and land. But they broke those promises quick. Soldiers attacked camps instead. In 1874, the Red River War kicked off. Over 1,000 troops hit Comanche villages, burning homes and food stores. They killed or captured over 1,400 horses in one battle, the Paladuro Canyon fight. The Comanche fought back, but they couldn't win against that kind of force. Starvation set in. Families went hungry for months. By June 1875, Quan and his band had no choice. They surrendered, the last holdouts of a once mighty people. Settlers cheered the end of the Comanche threat. They saw it as progress, but step back and look at what was lost. The Comanche didn't fall because they were weak. They fell because their world was torn apart. The buffalo slaughter wasn't an accident, it was a weapon. The army knew every dead buffalo was a blow to the tribes. Smallpox wasn't their fault either. Traders and soldiers brought it in, and the Comanche had no way to stop it. They held on longer than most. From the 1700s to the 1870s, they kept the Spanish, Mexicans, and Texans at bay, ruling 250,000 square miles at their peak. That's over a century of power, built on their own terms. Their legacy isn't just defeat, it's strength. They took horses from the Spanish and made them their own, turning a small tribe into a force that stopped empires. They fought for every inch of their land, even when the odds stacked high. Quanah Parker didn't vanish after 1875. He led his people on the reservation, pushing for their rights until he died in 1911. Today, about 17,000 Comanche descendants live on, keeping their story alive. They survived a war that wasn't fair, a war that took their plains but not their spirit. The Comanche show what it means to adapt, to stand tall, and to keep going when everything's against you. Their fall was forced, but their mark on history can't be erased. The Comanche's story doesn't end with their surrender in 1875. They were warriors, no doubt, riding across 250,000 square miles with a fierceness that shook the West. But they were more than that. They were a people trying to hold on to their world as it crumbled under smallpox, buffalo hunters, and armies. Their tale isn't simple. It's not just good guys and bad guys. It's a messy clash of cultures where both sides lost something big. The Comanche weren't only victims, suffering through disease and broken promises. They weren't only villains, leaving scars on captives like Matilda Lockhart. They were human, caught in a hard time that shaped them into what they became. Look at them now, with 17,000 descendants carrying their name today. Their spirit didn't die in Oklahoma. It lives on, a reminder of what they built and what they endured. Their fall came from forces they couldn't stop, but their rise came from their own hands. They took horses and made an empire. They fought for over 150 years to keep it. That's not just a defeat, it's a lesson. So here's something to think about. What does their fight, against odds like 4 million buffalo killed and thousands lost to sickness, say about hanging on when everything changes? In our world now, split by borders and beliefs, can the Comanche teach us how to stand together instead of tearing each other apart?